like to call into order the Southborough School Committee open meeting of Wednesday, December 13th, 2017. And first item on the agenda is audience sharing. Next item is new business.
Well, we have 3 outstanding presentations for us this evening, and no better way than to start off with what's happening in one of our schools, particularly the Trottier Middle School. And as we remember, back in June, Keith and Gary presented the new school improvement plan. So tonight, we anxiously await your update, Principal Lavoie.
Thank you very much. We do always look forward to the opportunity to update the committee on our progress, and we did introduce the new plan back in June, but I'm very happy and delighted to share that we have made a lot of progress in the different goal areas. So Gary and I are going to tag team it today to give you some of those pieces of information, and I happily take any questions you have. We do have some really excellent things to say. So we're going to start with goal 1, and Gary's going to take that.
Yeah, as part of this goal, in looking at school culture, we were really seeking to improve student motivation and well-being by continuing to foster belonging, purpose, and connectedness. One of the things that we were able to do this year is that Team Hoyt, Rick and Dick Hoyt, the marathon father and son duo, opened our first day of school and talking to our students, and they had a very simple message of yes, you can. And their story was pretty inspirational. We were able to take that message and kind of use it to drive some of our work with students this year. We simply had students identify a single goal for the year that they wanted to accomplish. It could have been academic, social, athletic, musical, and what we did is we produced a magnet where they wrote down their goal and they could affix it to their locker. So that was motivation for them. The other piece was building that connectedness with adults. And what we've done throughout the course of the year is manufacture an opportunity where our teachers met with our students to talk about where they were in the goal process. And I can tell you that not only did this help motivate students into continuing their goal, but more importantly, it helped build some inroads between teachers and students. And students shared their desire to either improve in a particular subject or make a team. Others shared that they wanted to become an Eagle Scout, climb Mount Kilimanjaro, starting a fundraising effort to provide clean water, learn an instrument, make the Olympic badminton team, or make more friends. So these conversations not only really reaffirmed how wonderful and spectacular our students are, it gave our teachers a stronger understanding of what drives them, where their interest falls, and the challenges that they face. And really gave us, a deeper look into their personalities, which I can tell you they are plentiful. We will continue this work in January as our faculty will look at some of the best practices we had in sharing out these goals with students, and to see how we can use this as a springboard going forward. Teachers have already suggested that we should continue this on a year-to-year basis and just streamline the process. It will also streamline nicely with our DOT activity that where we do our inventory of looking at students in our building and the connections that teachers have with those students. The other piece I want to highlight is our work with Project Unify. If you're not familiar with this organization, it really was born out of our work with Special Olympics that happened once at the end of the year. And from that success, we've created a student-run club that has been more organized and has had greater visibility within the school. Their mission is really to build inclusion opportunities for children in our CASTLE program, our NEC partnership, and our collaborative program. The events that they've had this year is that they've had an after-school Halloween party. They've had a student attendance at the student-faculty field hockey game, which I'm proud to say that we tied. And there was also a Thanksgiving with no injuries. There was also a Thanksgiving celebration. Not only does the program open new opportunities for our students with special needs, our typical students are learning a great deal about acceptance and inclusion. In addition, you have to realize that all the events are generated by the students and they are student-led. So during the Halloween party, for example, every activity that was coordinated came from the students. They got the materials, they ran the activities, they were the facilitators of these events. So the leadership that's taking place has really been tremendous. Our students' abilities to make connections with these student programs has just been a true pleasure to watch.
Goal number 2. For goal number 2, we highlight our work in curriculum instruction and assessment. And the goal reads to promote academic excellence across all content areas by providing a comprehensive curriculum which meets the needs of all learners and includes a continued focus on analysis of curriculum assessments and data, instructional practices, and intervention systems. So it's always an ongoing process of reviewing curriculum and working with each other through our data teams and at the team level. So to highlight what we've done this fall, we've embarked on a new endeavor to try to adopt new world language resources for our Spanish program at the middle school. And fortunately, under Greg's leadership and in collaboration with Milliken and Algonquin, we launched that process. And the dialogue has been great. The curriculum leaders from all 3 schools have had conversations. The principals have been checking in along the way, and we've made good progress. So we're hoping in FY19 to procure some resources, web-based more than likely, that will provide a little bit of a backbone and not necessarily the customary textbook that we grew up with, but a more interactive type of way of getting curriculum. It's, Spanish textbooks, I think, stick out. The ones that we had, or even the ones that are 10 years old, feel like they're 30 years old with the content that's highlighted, the vocabulary that's highlighted, and we want to make it current and accessible for the kids that way. So that's been a common thread of the conversations, is how do we maintain it so it remains current and we don't have, just paperweights, from 10 years, 5-10 years from now. So really thinking that through. It has been a lot to digest for the team, and they're excited about kind of formulating some recommendations. So next time we chat, I'm sure we'll have an update on that. The other thing I wanted to highlight through this work and happening this fall, and all of our schools participated in this in one way or the other, was our curriculum summit, also led by Greg. Kind of brought all of our curriculum leaders together for a full day of actually celebration to start, showcasing our atlas maps and how they are now in a published form. Was an awesome, how many years? 6 years. And it was great to finally push go and see something that came together. And it's been referenced. I see a few visits here and there that parents have made and the public has made here and there, but certainly that was a celebration, a collaboration of many people's input over a long 6 years of time. So that was the first half. The second half was giving our curriculum leaders an opportunity to learn observation skills and to really look at things that are happening in the classroom, not necessarily by what the teacher's delivering, but what the students are actually doing. And changing that focus over to that is something that a lot of us are looking at through a different realm. And why not bring in our curriculum leaders into that conversation? It was a great move and well received. So we're going to be planning our next round in January? February. I know we will give you guys updates on that. But that was certainly a high point of the fall. The other thing connected to this that we're tackling is a DataWise course. I don't know if you've heard that or not, but it's one that's presented by Harvard in a web-based form. And Gary and I have taken the course and actually see already a lot of opportunities for connection that we're going to be making with our teams at Trottier in small doses. We don't want to overwhelm them with a lot of these things, but there are certain pieces we're going to be able to roll out in the months and years to come. So that's progress with Goal 2 in a pretty short time, so I'm pretty happy to share that. Gary, want Goal 3?
Sure. For Goal 3, we're really looking at our inclusion practices. One of the things we're very proud about this year is the adoption of 2 new programs, both the CASTLE program, which is an acronym for Communication, Access, Socialization, Transition, Learning, and Enjoyment, and the New England Center for Children Partnership. Both of the programs, if you're now familiar with them, are designed for children who require significant and intensive specialized instruction to support learning challenges. So this goes beyond Project Unified.
Right.
The addition of the 2 new programs have been a huge undertaking, but Keith and I are very fortunate to have the staff that we have here to take on these challenges. And we also have been able to use the great work and consistency that NERI had with the NEC program and carried on their efforts here at Trottier. With any new program, we experience some growing pains, but really the spirit of inclusion at Trottier and within Southborough will carry the day. What we've done at this point, we've included these students more and more in more opportunities. For example, we've had 4 students from the 2 programs attend the Stone Trip. We're also expanding their academic experiences, where they're pushing into music, art, science, physical education, and technology education. We've really taken on that Home Depot approach of let's just build something. So, beyond these two programs, which we're very proud of, we've also focused on professional development for our educational support personnel, formerly known as aides or paraprofessionals, and the focus really has been to build more consistency between ESPs and classroom teachers. We've had a range of trainings and workshops for the ESPs, including work around mindfulness, social thinking, reading comprehension strategies, and executive functioning. Our work with our special education consultant, really, although she's a special education consultant, really she's just a good teaching consultant, has continued from last year. In these efforts, we continue to examine and model our best practices. We are having teachers do a self-inventory of their work and really feel that professional reflection is a key to improvement. We're also having them do a deep dive into student engagement and what that should look and feel like within the classroom. And lastly, we're continuing our work into enhancing co-teaching practices between classroom teachers and our educational support personnel.
That's a lot right there. And rounding things out with goal number 4, the comprehensive learning environments for 21st century learners, formerly known as the technology goals, but certainly taken a new twist. There are 3 things that we are going to update you on in this realm. The collaborative work settings that we have spoke about before, and we have an update on that we're very proud of. Certainly available devices, which I know the committee and central office has supported, and we're very close to a complete overhaul of that. And then our piloting and leading toward an adoption of Canvas, which is the learning management system that's being adopted at the high school, and we are piloting it this winter going into spring. So those 3 areas are where we're targeted. As far as the first, the collaborative work settings is really focused on, or came from, a grant opportunity that we were unsuccessful in getting, but the work behind it was tremendous by Sandy Scordato, our instructional technology integration specialist. She did a lot of work to kind of put it together, and we finally completed the first phase. The Southborough Ed Foundation, we were very fortunate enough to win a grant from them, and just last Friday, we had our first delivery of furniture that came in, which was in the form of 3 pods, 3 sets of tables and sets of chairs around those. And actually, I want to be able to show you guys a few pictures of what it looks like. Let me see if I can grab that really quick. It's hot off the presses. Sandy sent them to me today. So this is actually some of our students engaging in the Google Bootcamp elective that's offered to 8th graders. They're trying hard not to pose there, and I think there's a thumb in the way, so I do apologize for the upper right. But you'll see that what was purchased were these tables, which are run on casters, and these chairs, which everyone is falling in love with. And the adaptability of this furniture is really allowing kids to be at these pod stations, work with one another, and then have an interactive screen available to them to, like I'm doing now, projecting common work, bringing things together and such like this. So the idea is to bring this, in the form of a full classroom. So here it is without the kids. It's not as impressive without. But certainly the opportunities that build off of this are tremendous. The different colors too. So we have three different sets and 3 different working areas. And Sandy's very excited. I think Christmas came a little early for her when this popped up, and we were able to deliver. So certainly we're going to be working on completing the whole picture in the months ahead, and hopefully continuing to do research for the use of this type of materials as we're building these types of spaces. The second thing, and certainly does not go understated by the support that we've received, is Chromebook Initiative at Trottier. We're almost there. We're very close. And the one thing related to school improvement is not just adding devices and having carts and things like that, but it's the sharing practices, the care for that equipment, the idea of a plan moving forward of how we're going to replace on an ongoing basis and keeping them current is something that we're really looking into. And certainly how our teachers are using it. The accessibility through the infrastructure and just the option of, hey, go grab your Chromebooks is something that didn't exist 2-3 years ago. So we're very fortunate to have that option available, and I don't want that to be understated. And the last is our piloting of Canvas. And things have launched at the high school very successfully, and we are in collaboration with them about launching our pilot, which will be in January of 2018. And our teachers we have a small group of teachers, five teachers on a pilot team who are actually fully building their learning environments through Canvas. And we are going to be launching that in the months ahead. So we had a teacher really doing a lot of work today and came down at 2:30 saying, I'm ready. I'm excited and I'm ready, and I can't wait to see how this is going to be game-changing for her and the experience she's able to build. So that's exciting, and that will be definitely part of our next report. So we thank you for the opportunity, and certainly would love to have any questions you may have.
I have one.
Go ahead, Mike.
You don't need to go back
Okay.
to the slide, but on goal 3, the review of inclusion practices, there's a bullet on the summary sheet that says developing educational support, professional and instructional practices. I mean, can you able to speak briefly to how you're going about that? I mean,
Sure. So, I mean, our... What's that?
You can talk about the half days too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so our educational support professionals in the classroom have, some of them are certified teachers. They're
Right.
tremendous resources for, to expand our capacity. And so we're really trying to look at tapping into their capacity to enhance the learning environment for our students and to diversify the learning environment. So really building that team teaching approach with our teachers. So the trainings that we've been giving them are to build that level of consistency where they're an extension of the teacher, not only around the curriculum, but the pedagogy which they're using in the classroom. So they're helping with instruction, they're helping with assessment, and they are supporting the students' needs at every turn.
so there's a lot of reliance on those professionals to develop the professional instructional practices? I mean,
Oh, no. Oh, so we do use their experience. Certainly their input has been very valuable in terms of what they feel is needed. However, it's a collaboration between the classroom teacher and the ESPs. And so in addition, we're also using the consultant. We had a consultant come and looked at our practices, highlighted some areas that really serve as a tremendous model in areas that we want to extend in a lot of the classrooms. We feel like we have these tremendous resources that we want to tap into to really enhance the learning experiences. So it's kind of we're doing an inventory, we're measuring our best practices, we're sharing out. Eventually, we'd love to have more teachers visit other classrooms to see some of these best practices, and that reflection piece has been critical.
So if I missed the timing on this, if you said it already, I apologize. Is there a start and end? I guess there is a start. Is there kind of an end to this where you feel you will at least kind of achieve where you want to be as far as having those instructional practices developed?
January is a kind of a benchmark. It's going to be the second session with our educational consultant. We're going to continue that work. We don't really have an end date in terms of in terms of our work, but it's been a driving force for us. I can tell you that the commonality of discussions around these approaches have been critical at the team level. I guess it will never really end. I mean, honestly, it's enhancing instruction. Well, when will the training end? We don't have an end date just yet.
Any way to measure success? I mean, kind of an ongoing situation like that, or
It's
not necessarily something you're going to try to do?
No. It's not going to come with an end package of sorts. It's almost in a way, having our aides and giving them some common language, and it's really enhanced their confidence to say we can help the teachers by doing this, and almost putting a name to that, which then allows them to execute. So it's also built opportunities in for the teachers to collaborate and give them some opportunities to collaborate with the aides, so that they don't necessarily, it's not always, okay, I think they're going to try to do this next. Now they know. They can predict with better consistency what's going to happen next. So it's actually rooted in the ability to build a relationship between the teachers and the aides.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Can you talk a little bit about Canvas, and I know it's rolling out of the high school, it was first implemented there, am I right on that? or-
That's correct.
Yeah, if you could just talk about how you're gonna roll the implementation through, and what you expect to get out of Canvas.
Oh man, the sky's the limit. We've been toying around with a learning management system now for a couple of years. I think me and you sat in on a couple of we call them seminars, not seminars, but kind of presentations around different learning management systems. So the way it exists right now is our ability to communicate and our ability to share is in a lot of different pockets. Okay, whether it's Google Classroom or our website or email or our online gradebook that teachers utilize, it kind of brings all of those things that would be considered a learning management system and bring it into one. And the idea is to certainly start with teachers becoming comfortable, then bringing in the student interface and how they can interact with the site and get the gains, and then hopefully eventually is to bring parents in and allow that to be accessed. So the benefits are as objective as having a common calendar or a single calendar to go where assignments overlay on each other in a clear way so you can kind of see what the long term is about. That's a basic objective way. Behind that, though, is the opportunity to bring together curriculum materials and to have one place to go where you can not only get the homework assignment, but what was some of the background material that will help a student understand that assignment better. And so you're not shopping, and I think of it this way, it's the Amazon of learning. You can literally get everything in one spot versus having to go to 9 different places. See, he says Home Depot. I'm doing all these plugs for it. But really, that's kind of, it is a season, apparently. But that's the way I kind of look at it. I'm not doing it justice of the ability that it can really, what it can really do, because I don't know that quite yet. We're just starting to learn it. So I know my teachers are very excited. Sandy Scordado's been instrumental in this, working with the high school and learning the growing pains of it in ways and learning from them is where we are right now. So I know we will definitely have reports moving forward. Yeah.
Follow on that, is this type of structure, is it grade independent, or are there kind of stratum that, you know, where there are variants depending on what grades you're focused on, or is it trying to get all things to everything?
So I think that, well, one of the reasons why we're implementing a new LMS like Canvas, our current grading system, our gradebook, is end of life, so it's no longer being supported. So one of the reasons why we're actually making the shift is because we need a new grading system implemented at the high school.
Well, my use of grade meant age, as long as.
So this is going to tier across all grades.
Okay.
It's independent of grade level.
Okay.
It's course specific, content specific. So every course that's offered at the middle school and high school will have an equivalent Canvas course too. But I think one of the exciting pieces is the gradebook and allowing teachers to give students time and effective feedback on products and assignments. This is, I think, the next step in our work around giving students feedback, and it really enhances what teachers can do.
Exciting stuff.
No, it's awesome.
Yeah,
A lot of potential.
really exciting stuff.
Yeah, teachers are really excited.
I had a couple of follow-ups. So are teachers going to be able to share resources with each other?
Absolutely. Through Canvas?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
And what's the connection between Canvas and Atlas? Or is there one?
Canvas and what?
Atlas.
Atlas was our curriculum mapping software that allowed us to bring standards and all the way down to activities kind of together. They are, I guess they are independent of each other, but the maps themselves are almost going to become, in a way, for a section of Canvas, what you're going to see. like by unit, so you go to a course and it will be broken up by unit and then down to different lessons depending on the degree that the teacher wants to take it. So in a way, it can be designed as a curriculum map, but for the most part, they are independent. Greg, am I saying that correctly? Yeah.
But, so Canvas would be used to implement what's outlined in Atlas? Is
Yes.
that-
Yes.
It disseminates the teacher, like,
Yeah,
Atlas
let's do
doesn't
it
have
here.
the homework assignment necessarily.
Right.
Canvas would house the homework
So
assignment.
it-
Yeah,
So Atlas would be the table of contents.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Within the chapter is all the details that the table of contents represents. It was also a precursor to any launch of learning management systems
Right.
that districts systemically chose to implement. So this was sort of an early skeletal example of what a learning management system could do. I think one of the key elements that Canvas brings that Atlas may not be able to, because it just simply doesn't have the capabilities, is the ability to enhance communication. And we know that that's a strategic focus area in our technology plan. And so through Canvas, we've enhanced the ability to communicate with one another, whether it's teacher to teacher, teacher to parent, parent to, student to teacher, and to do that in sort of a real-time basis. So that feedback loop is constant. And I think that's one of the true benefits behind what this can bring to the classroom and to teaching and learning, both for teachers and for students. The Atlas framework will exist and will continue to exist. It's also sort of a public consumption document as well. This is something that's out there so that the community at large can see what our framework looks like when it's actualized in terms of curriculum at the building level. So we're excited to have both, and we're excited to have one in place as we bring up the other and fully develop the implementation of that.
So I would imagine this would help you differentiate instruction.
Absolutely.
You could have modules for more advanced kids and that kind of thing.
Definitely. It provides a lot of opportunities.
I would love to see that. I mean, that's
Yeah.
something I've been kind of harping on for a while, is,
Yep.
more stuff for the more advanced kids.
Mhm.
So the more you can try to make that happen, the better.
Yep.
Great.
I have a question. I think that sounds great. So I had a question about the curriculum.
Yep.
When you're talking about this curriculum effort, is part of that, when we got the welcome letter this year and you click on the link and then you go into the curriculum database and then you can click on the school and then class and then you get the curriculum. Is that what you're talking about?
That's it.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
all right. Is that an ongoing process then? Because I did poke around in there quite a bit and there were a bunch of empty spots, but I figured it was sort of something that was being still filled in as time goes on, which is broader than Trottier, I think.
Right.
Just curious.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ongoing.
It is
Yeah.
ongoing, and it's, Keith and I smiled at one another. It was a 6-year event because it was new, and the goal is to continually refresh the information that's contained in Atlas. I think it's somewhat static now because we captured our curriculum for the most part, and now we need to go into a cycle of review and revisiting what's in the Atlas framework.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thank you.
you.
Yeah, for 3 months, basically.
A lot happened.
And a lot of actual alignment. I wanted to compliment Keith and Gary, because through the conversation and just the update that was provided, we can see so many elements of the strategic plan and the school improvement plan as presented in June. So a lot of good work to continue.
So next on the agenda is the ELL presentation.
Rhoda is becoming our annual December event. One much looked forward to and appreciated. That you do have the handout that she has in front of you. I think it's underneath your packet.
Thank you for the opportunity to give you an update of our English language learners in Southborough. We're looking at data captured as of December of this school year, and the first graph that you're looking at is the information of the trend analysis since 2004, since we've been collecting data on our English learners. The dark gray bars will indicate the number of students or English learners in the program every year. The numbers above the light gray bars indicate the number of students reclassified from the program. And for the first time this year, following the new regulations coming from the Department of Education, we have 4 years of collecting data on English learners who have been reclassified. So the 47 students above the light gray bar of 2017-2018 means that there are four years that we are monitoring students who have been reclassified to ensure their continued growth in their learning. So if we take a look at both the English learners and the former English learners, this gives a more complete picture of the number of students in our district being instructed as well as actively monitored by our English language development teachers. So we're looking at a total of 125 students in all. Something that is not reflected in the graph here are the number of students that every year our English language development teachers need to screen for language proficiency level to make sure that any child who is exposed to another language has sufficient English to be able to access grade level content and to do so successfully. So this year we took a look at 52 students, K through 8, for language proficiency level, and most of Southborough continues to grow from our lowest school up, and most of the students that we took a look at, it takes about 2 hours to work with students and to be able to assess their language proficiency level. And we also talk to parents, because to know the student's journey, to know their exposure both linguistically and culturally is very important when we make decisions. So about 27% of the students that we took a look at qualified as English learners. If you take a look at the second page, which looks at languages in our district, of both English learners and former English learners, we're looking at 21 languages total. And this year, our numbers, the prevalent languages are Chinese, Portuguese, and Russian. So there's a little bit of a shift compared to last year, which was Portuguese, Chinese, and Russian. And of course, the only difference is that last year there was Tagalog, and this year we have Albanian in that count. And there are more languages than this in Southborough, and that would be first language, not English, but that's not what we are taking a look at tonight. The variety of languages that we have in our district does allow for a rich linguistic and cultural diversity. And of course, if a family, and this is by law, cannot speak or read in English, it's important that that family has access to their child's education. And we make sure that our families are completely involved in what is happening at our schools. If you take a look at the third graph on the third page of the language proficiency levels that any student, and actually any adult also, would go through in learning a language. So level 1, called entering, is when there's absolutely no English, or a child might be at the word level, all the way to level 6, which would be functioning like a native speaker of the language with proficiency in the 4 language domains. That is at a 0, because by then we have reclassified all our students according to the level. So it would be like going from a beginners to an advanced stage in learning a language. I said there were 6 levels, but if you look at entering, emerging, and then developing is split into 2, low developing and high developing, and this is by recommendation of the Department of Education. There's a very big difference between a child who reaches a level 3 or developing, just reaching it at a simple sentence level, and by the time they are at the higher level proficiency of a level 3, and that's a very long stage. So the department recommends that we split the stages, and we can see that as of, I would say yesterday, because learning a language is fluid, we have 25% of our students at the foundational level, and that is at the beginning stages of learning the language, and about 75% of our students at the transitional level. This impacts how much instruction we provide, and by instruction I mean English language development. And we follow guidelines by the Department of Education. We naturally think that a student at the beginning stages needs a lot more intense, systematic instruction of the English language, and that is true. But as a student becomes more fluent in the language, the demands on the student to access all levels of grade level content are higher. So it is very important to provide the appropriate instruction to levels, high level 3, 4, and 5 as well. And as research, if we look at research, it does take 5 to 7 years at least to be able to reach proficiency in another language. Our students, meaning the English learners, have to take a state mandated test called the Access Test, Access 2.0 now, because it's the second version of it. It's become a more demanding test. That will start in January when we come back from vacation through February. This year, we are adding third grade to take the online modality of the test. So our students in grades 3 to 8 will be taking the test online. Grades 1 and 2, it will be paper-based, and kindergarten is an individual, developmentally appropriate, interactive assessment with a teacher. And our teachers are trained to be able to administer these tests. And of course, our students also take MCAS when it is appropriate to for their grade level. As regards homeschool connection and parent outreach, we continue to have a very strong partnership with all our families. Our families are very grateful, and they communicate that to our teachers because of the level of education and the level of engagement with our families. We get to know our families very well. They take part in parent conferences, open houses, the speaker series. And last year, for the first time, we had our international night at Algonquin. Families from our 10 schools attended. We had over 300 guests. The grandchildren came, the grandparents came. Our families asked if we could please repeat the event, so we're in the midst of setting a date for this spring. And they would really like us to get together more than once a year. But we're seeing now that we are also having things happen at the school level in which we are engaging families. They've always been engaged at the school level. But for example, Trottier, the students requested a culture club after school, so that is taking place. And there's also these events are starting to be reflected at the school level as well. And of course, the other thing that was happening in our district is that learning a language is important for everyone. So the Seal of Biliteracy, which will the task group that is preparing this to be able to see our students at the high school level graduate with a seal on their diploma for those students that choose to follow that pathway. And that serves all worlds, because a child that only knows English and learning another language can receive that seal, if they reach an intermediate level of proficiency in another language, and for our English learners who have to learn English and reach a level of proficiency in English as well, also showing competency in another language. So that's a very exciting initiative that we are looking into in our district. So thank you for the opportunity to share this with you tonight.
Well, first I want to say thank you for coming again, Laura. And every year I look forward to this presentation.
Thank you.
It's the one that always stays on my mind, just from thinking back to the very first one or two that I saw. There's been a little bit of a change in the population in the last few years in terms of the number of students that are actually entering the program. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on regarding populations? Is there anything that you're seeing that's kind of a macro trend there? Or?
Yes, in the sense of languages,
Yeah.
numbers, languages. Yes. So we are seeing more Arabic speakers join our community. And it's not that Massachusetts is very diverse. So It's just a question of when families move into our town, because all these languages are prevalent in Massachusetts. So it's just a question of time when we see some languages and the families move into our communities. So it's also a reflection when we see on what might be happening and mobility within the United States and from abroad into the United States. We will see it at some point in Southborough as well. I'm not sure, I hope I'm answering your question.
Well, I think you basically did. I'm trying to get some kind of idea of what would cause the populations to change a little bit. For example, in 2017 to 18, if you add the two numbers together, we actually have, I believe we probably have pretty close to the most students in the program. If you add in the number of former and current English language learners, because you're actually providing to both those student groups, right? So in fact, so in one respect, we have the most students ever in the program right now.
Yes.
But on the other hand, though, we have the least amount of, the lowest number of new students.
And
it
part
just-
of that, yes, and in a way, what also happens is that regulations go changing. So this year, we've had to reclassify at a lower language proficiency level, because before it was at level 5, now that has changed. They've lowered the exit criteria as regards looking just at access. We use multiple data to be able to reclassify a student.
Okay.
So that also shifts the way that we need to operate within, to follow the guidelines from the Department of Education. Otherwise, the numbers would be a bit higher.
I see.
And we're going to be monitoring those students very carefully, those that we had to reclassify.
Yeah.
And to see that it was actually, and the department has asked us for feedback, to see if we actually agree with the new criteria that they have given us to exit, just looking at the access test.
Okay.
But we don't just go by that, but we've had to follow new regulations. That's why if we were following the old regulations, our numbers would be higher.
Okay. So basically you reclassify according to regulations as you move forward.
Yes.
But when you're looking at the prior numbers, those are the old classifications. So sometimes if I'm looking at something from a year or two back and comparing it to now, it might not be apples and apples.
You are right.
Okay.
That is right. Yes.
So I'm sure you're going to remind me that you told me this last year, but I'll ask it again. So in looking at these categories, so what happens to cause a former English learner to drop out of that category?
That's a good question. What happens is that they've received, we take a look at all the data that we have, especially classroom work, and they will have moved forward in, for example, from a level 5 to go to level 6. That means that the language proficiency level, and especially in comprehension and in writing, now is comparable to students at that grade level. So therefore, they no longer belong to that level of language proficiency, but have moved to a higher level of language proficiency. Am I addressing your question?
I think so. When you said level 5 versus level 6, I think when you were talking about these levels, you said that the developing level is actually
Yes.
split into 2 levels.
Yes.
So which is level 6?
So level 6 would be a
The last
student
one?
that is, sorry,
Okay,
at an advanced level,
okay,
an advanced level of English
okay,
in listening, speaking, reading, and writing,
okay,
of language proficiency,
Right.
right? So language proficiency means, are they able to access and understand what's going on in the classroom? And are they able to read and write for what would be considered grade level?
okay.
We have criteria to follow.
Yeah,
So
that
each
makes
of-
sense.
Yes, each of these
The
levels
grade-
have descriptors, and we have to, we abide by those descriptors.
So when I look at the levels on the chart on the 3rd page, when it gives a number of hours per week, like entering would be 4.45 hours per week, is that one-to-one time with an ELL instructor?
So preferably so.
Yeah.
There is flexibility into what is best for the student or the group of students, because we group students according to language proficiency and to be more effective in our instruction, and also work collaboratively with the classroom teachers or subject teachers. So that is it is direct sequential instruction of the English language.
Okay.
So the answer to that is yes, we need to be fulfilling that.
I have a question. Do you ever graduate out of the former English learner category?
Yes, by law, after 4 years.
Okay.
So it's really time frame.
Yes.
That's a partial answer to my question. Right?
So the former English learners, by law, before we just had to follow our student for 2 years. By following means monitoring them, speaking to classroom subject teachers, looking at their MCAS scores, and fill out forms. That was only for 2 years. Now it is 4 years that we need to ensure success of that student in learning to the best of their abilities. So that's when they would graduate out of the category. So that is fluid. Every year that will change.
It will change how?
The students.
Oh, okay.
After 4
okay.
years,
Not-
that
not-
student,
not
I'm
the
not
de-
counting
not
that
the
student.
4-year requirement.
No, no. After that 4 years, we're not counting that student any longer.
Okay.
Yes. There's a lot of data to follow.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rhoda.
And next is the MCAS presentation, which we always look forward to.
So it's that time of year again, where we present our MCAS results to the committee. And this year we have a lot to share because a lot has changed over the past 12 months. So really the goals of my presentation this evening is really to update the school committee and the community on the changes that have taken place in terms of MCAS 2.0. Provide an overview of the MCAS online assessment environment and actually give you a student perspective of what the environment looks like. Share the results. How did our students perform? How did our district perform? Discuss progress and next steps, and answer any questions the committee may have. So this is a timeline that Superintendent Johnson began in her first presentation several years ago around the educational landscape and all of the initiatives from the state level that we were required to implement as a district from 2009 all the way to 2018. Our educators have been very flexible and adaptive to many of these changes. Many of these changes are still with us today, but some of those initiatives died out and were only lasted a year. So it's important to note that although the state has initiatives, they don't always come to fruition in terms of the effort and work that we put into it. And we're always mindful when we're implementing a new state initiative what the outcome is for it and how can we benefit as a district. The past 3 years, we've seen a number of changes. One of the major changes has been the next generation MCAS assessment, MCAS 2.0. We've continued to see revisions to the ELA and mathematics curriculum frameworks. And last year or 2 years ago, we saw the adoption of next generation science standards, and this year we'll see the implementation of a computer-based science assessment. So it's always important to talk about the context of this work. So MCAS 2.0 is an assessment that measures how well our students are growing and achieving and how well our district is performing. But behind that really are what we want students to be able to know and do. So knowledge and skills, and those are identified by the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks. And in terms of MCAS, students are assessed on ELA, math, science, technology, and engineering. And we've seen an increase in terms of the framework rigor, an increase in terms of the expectations of students in terms of content knowledge and skills. We've seen literacy being a very important component across all content areas: math, science, history, and social science. So our teachers have done an excellent job at adapting and modifying curriculum to address increased rigor, increased demands on students. And obviously the goal of the framework and the standards is to give teachers and educators and districts guidelines of how to develop curriculum and really think about what type of students do we want to prepare leaving our district in terms of college and career readiness. So with the changes in rigor and standards and frameworks from the state also looked at changing the assessment. This MCAS 1.0 has been around for 17 to 18 years. It really hasn't changed all that much, but the expectations of students has. So the genesis behind the next generation MCAS is really creating an assessment that focuses on applying knowledge, analyzing information, and evaluating information, and making sure that assessment is aligned to what is happening in our classrooms on a daily, weekly, and yearly basis. So last year, 2016, 2017, grades through 8 experienced computer-based testing. Grade 10 remained paper and pencil based. And the principals, the leadership team, students, teachers, the technology team put in a tremendous amount of effort to make this a smooth transition for students. So I want to commend the principals for their hard work and leadership, and teachers for their work in implementing the computer-based assessment. Overall, went very well with a few glitches because of the great planning and preparation that took place. It's important to note that the MCAS 2.0 is a different measurement. So the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education did place an accountability pause as a result of the assessment measure changing. We can no longer compare 2015-16 results to last year's results. It's comparing apples to oranges. And lastly, 2017 results really are the baseline for future measurements and targets for all districts across the Commonwealth. So just comparing MCAS 1.0 to 2.0, there are a lot of changes that took place. One of the major changes is it went from paper and pencil to computer-based. The other major change is there were no universal accessibility features built into the paper and pencil-based assessment. With online ecosystem, students now have tools that are built into the environment, such as highlighting, zooming, flagging, notepads, item eliminator. So it's a much more responsive environment for all kids. The types of questions, item types have changed. Evidence-based short response, technology-enhanced open response, and essay was limited to 4th and 8th grade, and now grades 3 through 8 experience some type of narrative, expository, or memoir writing experience in the assessment. And lastly, the achievement metrics moved from warning needs improvement, proficient, advanced to exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, partially not meeting. So those metrics changed. So what does the MCAS 2.0 environment look like for a student? So I thought I'd kind of walk you quickly through what a student would experience. So this is a 5th grade computer-based practice test. So in my computer is a little bit of a delay. So just trying to catch up. There we go. So when students log in, it gives them directions, and they begin their assessment. And if you notice along the top, students can move back and forth They can review the assessment. They do not have to answer all the questions in order. They have the ability to bookmark questions, so they can read a question and come back to it. There is, and I apologize, I'm having problems with my mouse here. There's a built-in notepad, so students can take notes as they move through the assessment. They can also eliminate answers, so in a multiple choice question, they can actually use the elimination tool and actually eliminate answers. And then exhibits are built into the assessment as well. So, for example, this is the directions for this particular question. So if students move through the passages, so today you'll read a passage from Groen of Paul Bunyan. As you read, pay close attention to the character's thoughts. This will help you answer questions and prepare you to write a narrative story. So again, multiple choice questions using the question eliminator. They can all eliminate as they think about their work. This is an example of a technology-enhanced question that students experience. So students are asked to read the passage. They have events, and they can actually drag and drop the events in sequence.
Can I ask you a question, Greg, as we're going? There's a lot of tools available. Is there training ahead of time to show the students how to use this?
So we simulate practice assessments with students, so they
Okay.
actually get used to the testing environment online.
Okay.
So,
And teachers.
and
teachers.
And teachers as well.
Did I see it right on a previous slide that it's all untimed?
So all in time.
Completely?
So
Okay.
students
as
have.
long as it takes them, they just-
Exactly, yeah. They do have recommended timeframes or windows, but again, we try to be as flexible as possible with the testing environment, so time does not become a factor for students. So this is, again, an example of, you've read the passage, think about how the story would be different if it were told from Johnny's point of view. Write the story from the point of view of Johnny. So again, thinking about perspective, higher order thinking in terms of applying perspective to writing a piece. So this is an example of where students need to navigate between two pieces and answer text and compare and contrast pieces. So this is the first of two poems that students will need to read. And again, my computer's on a delay.
I thought you were just letting us enjoy the poem.
Yes. This is the again, this is a second poem. And this is an example. Compare the speaker's attitude in First Night to the speaker's attitude in Beach Leaves. Be sure to use details from both poems to develop your essay. And then students are given a text box to respond. So this is just one example of students being asked to compare and contrast two pieces of writing or text, and then respond in terms of writing. So when they're done, it will give them how many they have not answered and how many bookmarks. So this is a great visual for students. They might have left one question unanswered. In a paper and pencil environment, it's very easy to forget and not answer that question. So again, this is just one example of a feature that really benefits students and gives them some good information. And then finally, they submit their final answer. and it says, congratulations, you scored 0 out of 8 points. So that's just an example of the computer-based environment students are experiencing, but also the higher order thinking skills that students are required to navigate these assessments. I think the assessment is much more challenging and much more rigorous. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the assessment. In the past, MCAS 1.0, so the achievement metrics were warning, needs improvement, proficient, advanced, with scaled scores. And with MCAS 2.0, we have new achievement metrics and new scaled scores. So we cannot compare prior years to this past testing year. And again, it is really a baseline year and baseline data. One common metric that we can continue to measure from prior years is student growth percentile, SGP. And again, SGP is compares like districts, like schools, prior 2 years of data and assessment data to our students and rates them. How great did our students grow compared to like districts? And scales can range from 1 to 99. 40 to 60 is considered typical growth. Below 40 is low growth, low achievement. Above 60 is high growth, high achievement. And if you take the achievement level and SGP, it really gives you a picture of a district's performance. So now we're going to take a look at some of the data. So in prior years, this is a table and a graph that you would see that would be presented to you. And we spent a lot of time looking at cohort data and progression of achievement over time. And we track trends. So again, with the change of the assessment, this no longer is a comparison that we can make. So one of the things we looked at is 2016 Southborough MCAS results, grades 3 through 8, compared to the state results. And we use that as a benchmark. So compared to the state, Southborough had 34% more students score in the advanced interval, with 16% of the students score, more students score in the proficient interval compared to the state. We had 130% fewer students score in the needs improvement interval compared to the state, and 200% fewer students score in the warning interval compared to the state. So we use this kind of as a baseline to compare the MCAS 2.0 state performance compared to Southborough. And this is what our results in MCAS 2.0 look like. So again, exceeding expectations, 13% compared to the state 7%. Meeting expectations, 63% to 42% the state. Partially meeting, 22 from Southborough, 41 to the state, and not meeting expectations, 3% in Southborough to 10% in at the state level. The Commissioner of Education actually shared a letter with all across the Commonwealth for districts to understand that to expect around 50% of the students scoring in exceeding expectations and meeting expectations. That was the bar that they set. So when we look at Southborough comparison in those metrics compared to the state, Southborough exceeding expectations, we had 46% more students score in that interval than the state. In the meeting expectations, we had 33% more students score in that interval. Partially meeting, we had 86% fewer students than the state scoring and partially meeting expectations. And we had 233% fewer students scoring and then not meeting expectations. And if you compare it to 2016, using that same metric, different assessment, you can see that we've made some growth even with a more challenging assessment. So,
Can I understand this math for a second?
yes.
So, you have these 4 categories. Let's talk about the state. So, X% of the state is in each of those categories.
Correct. Yeah.
So, X% of us is in each of those categories. So, if we see something that says we had 200% less in the, what is it, the needs improvement?
Yeah.
What's 200, so 200% less, I'm just gonna make up numbers. If the state had 20% in this category, what's 200% less? 10%, 5%?
So if you look at Southborough warning was 200% less than the state. I'm going to go back to this right here. So the warning, we had 200% less than the state. So the state had 9% of the students on the ELA assessment in grades 3 through 8 score in the warning.
And we had 3?
We had 3%
3%,
of
okay,
Southborough
so it
students.
is.
So it's really
Yeah,
a
I
relationship.
got it. Thank you.
And again, when we look at trends, we want to see students move from right to left. We want to see them move from not meeting expectations to exceeding expectations. So this is a chart that shows, a graph that shows median student growth percentile and achievement. So Southborough's median growth percentile was 55, and meeting or exceeding expectations, we had 76%. And this is student or districts across the Commonwealth and how they performed. So again, if you look at that upper right quadrant, we had high achievement, high growth in the areas of ELA. So each of those circles represents a school district. So moving on to math in terms of achievement in math. Looking at 2016 Southborough compared to 2016 state, we had 46% more students scoring in the advanced interval. 0%, so we had the same amount of students in proficient compared to the state in 2016. We had 92% fewer students scoring in the needs improvement interval and 400% less students scoring in the warning interval. And again, we use that as a baseline comparison. So in mathematics, we had 25% of our students in Southborough exceeding expectations, 57% of the students meeting expectations, 16% partially meeting, and then 2% not meeting expectations. And then on the right, you see the state's performance. And again, if you compare Southborough's performance to the state, we had 68% more students score in the exceeding expectations, 30% more students scored in the meeting expectations than the state, 156% fewer students scoring in the partially meeting, and then 500% fewer students scoring in not meeting expectations. In terms of student growth and achievement, so the math student SGP was 66, so high achievement or high growth in achievement was 81, so we had 81% of our students meeting or exceeding expectations. And then relative to the state, this is where community of Southborough falls. So what do we do with all of this data? So obviously, it's just an assessment, but it provides the district with a wealth of information. Schools spend a lot of time looking at school-based performance, disaggregating the data by subgroups. So looking at looking at gender, how gender is performing, looking at how our student, IEP, student with special needs are performing on the assessment. And we really use this data to identify areas for improvement. We also look at individual student reports, and teachers spend a lot of time looking at a student's profile and analyzing the student's results and using that data to improve instruction or to create a pathway of instruction for a student. And we use the MCAS results to inform teaching. So we look for patterns and trends over time in terms of performance. And MCAS is one data point, and teachers spend a lot of time triangulating the data. So we have our local assessments, we have our classroom assessments, and really trying to triangulate the data to develop a story on a student and performance in terms of areas of curriculum. We're continuing to align our curriculum as frameworks change, as our students change, as we identify areas to focus, we make those adjustments. We're really looking at increasing the rigor, so really looking at what's happening in terms of our classroom, what types of experiences are students having in terms of the classroom instruction. Are those experiences aligned with what students are expected to know and do? And are students getting experiences where they're going to be successful on a variety of measures, one of those being MCAS. And I think it's important to note that what guides our work in the district is our strategic plan. It really is the anchor. As Keith and Gary did a great job this evening presenting an update in the school improvement plan for Trottier. Schools use this strategic plan to develop school improvement plans, and educators use the school improvement plans to develop their own professional practices, student learning goals. So there is a byline that exists through educator goals, school improvement goals, and the strategic plan. And I think it's benefited the district greatly because there's coherence in terms of what we're working on. I think over the past several years, we've increased professional development opportunities. We've provided a lot of teachers with content knowledge, access to experts. We've added a math coach in Southborough, which has been a tremendous asset in terms of giving teachers what they need. In math, we've expanded digital tools and resources. In ELA, we've provided teachers with professional learning around ELA. We've aligned our resources and given teachers a lot of time to collaborate, look at student work, and make curriculum adjustments, instructional changes. And then in science, we're in our second year of implementing new science curriculum. We have a 3-year plan. It's aligned to next generation science frameworks, and we're spending a lot of time focusing on inquiry and hands-on experiences for students, and that's going very well. So I think our strategic focus areas are going to be continue to provide professional development for teachers. Teachers are our greatest asset, developing their content knowledge, their instructional practice. Teachers are engaged in using data to inform instruction. And as Gary mentioned, with our paraprofessionals, we're working on focusing on research-based instructional practices. What are those high-yield instructional practices that will yield growth and achievement in our students? And then really focusing on higher order thinking. Helping students analyze and critically think and create, so they're well prepared for the next grade level and at the high school level for college and career. So that is kind of a bird's eye view of the assessment landscape, how Southborough performed in MCAS 2.0, and I just would like to commend teachers. I think teachers have done a fabulous job being proactive in their changes in terms of instructional practice in their classrooms. I think principals have been very proactive we're not reacting to these changes. We're very thoughtful and thorough in terms of understanding when these changes are going to be implemented and how, so that students are prepared. So I think it's been a team effort, and I think our results show that the assessment change was more challenging, but our students really rose to the challenge and really performed well.
Question? So one of the issues that historically follows testing, and, you know, always to some degree exists as the elephant in the room, and I'm not saying how large an elephant, okay, is that the result of testing can sometimes measure how well somebody knows how to take a test as opposed to how much they know. And I know that that's a challenge in, you know, in moving testing forward. So here we've got a CAS 2.0. So I'm curious how you as an educator and whatever you may know about what the state's view is of kind of how is this kind of current testing process kind of measure up in people's minds as trying to eliminate as much as possible, not that you can ever eliminate it totally, that characteristic.
So I think that I think the district's philosophy is it's one metric, it's one assessment in a system of a balanced assessments that we provide. There are students who may not perform well on this day in this environment, but there are many opportunities over a student's school career, classroom experience to show what he or she knows, and students and teachers are very aware of that. So I think as much as we want to, so it is an assessment, it is a contrived experience, it is a controlled experience for students. We do our best to prepare them, but we don't, our work in our classrooms drives what we think students should be able to know and do. We don't change or adapt to, so students are prepared for a specific assessment. Good teaching first, and if we have good teaching practices and good resources and great teachers, students are going to perform well in any measure that is put in front of them, whether it's MCAS 1.0, 2.0, a classroom assessment. So it does an okay job at assessing students' understanding, but the value add that we add are other data points and other metrics, like classroom end of unit assessments, common assessments in terms that we administer as a district outside of this environment.
I have a question. The student growth percentile, how did they derive that this year? If it's, you know, you can't compare to last year.
So there is a white paper on how they
I had to ask.
You had to ask.
You know, so they do have a white paper, and it's a very complex formula that they engaged in. I'm not sure the math behind it and the stats behind it, but I do know that the DESC has a stats team focused on trying to measure 1.0 to 2.0, and they felt that the growth percentile, they could do that statistically and have a valid measure in terms of growth.
Okay. So it seems like going forward, I mean, it's hard to sustain growth. If you have high growth,
Right.
you're not going to end up with as high a growth as someone else who didn't have that high a growth in the past. So that's a hard.
So if this year is our baseline,
Right. Okay.
compared to another district who maybe did not perform as well, their baseline is, they have more room for improvement in terms of achievement and growth.
Yeah, there always seems to be that trade-off of achievement and growth, you know. But I just want to say though that these we know we always have the discussion about how important these numbers are, and we know that in many respects they are important. People look at them, and certainly in the public they're important, and they're really you can't help but feel really good about it when your system has
Impressive.
really good
Very impressive.
results like this. And, so I guess they must mean a lot. No, just because, next year,
Whether they're important or not, they're impressive, right?
they're impressive. I mean, especially,
They are.
the thing that, I think they're impressive across the board, but especially in math, because I think that we've come so far over the last several years. And I know that we've invested a lot in it, and we've brought in math specialists, and I just think that I just have a sense that there's been, from not just seeing these scores, but just a general sense that we've significantly improved what was already a pretty good program, and we just brought it up a little bit. But to have a growth percentile, I believe it's 65 in math, is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's, anything over 60 is outside of the normal range, and that's outside of the normal range of the high end. That's really a pretty good job.
Absolutely.
So I just want to say to everybody that for whatever reason, this was a really good year. Of course, now next year, there's going to be new numbers that are going to come out, and you're starting off at a really high place. But just wonderful job all the way around. And I think the kids did great, and I think they're, whether or not, again, without getting into the argument about whether these things mean that much, okay, you obviously prepared them well for the test. So they were prepared, and they went in, and they.
We feel the test is more aligned to what happens in our classrooms on a day-to-day
Well,
basis.
that's what I was just gonna, I mean, this really
That's what I
goes
mean.
back a
It-
couple
it-
of years, doesn't it? I
Yeah,
mean,
but by prepared, I mean through the classroom. I don't mean that we don't have our kids practice
Exactly.
exams. We make sure they go in, when they go in to take these exams, I think they're prepared to take them, because they know the stuff, and it's stuff that you're supposed to be covering, and we're covering it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's because years ago, we implemented a new curriculum that put a focus on critical thinking, things like that, which is reflected in this new test. So, of course they did well. So that's a great job. I have one other question. Do we have access to the questions?
Some,
Some?
yes. What was really helpful this year is we had access to fourth grade students' open responses. So we were able to see how each student responded. So that was really helpful to both fourth grade and fifth grade teachers.
You think you can get better
That
than
was an
grade 0
addition.
for 8?
Yes. That's an easy target.
I mean, if you're gonna, we had this discussion before, but if you're gonna try to use these results to, figure out what kids need help with, that helps to have the questions. So,
That's actually the phase at which our math teachers are right now. They wanted me to provide them with an item analysis of how they did on the questions, all of them, because you can at least get the standards that they're connected to. And for 5 of them, I think, I don't know the exact number, for a little number, you can actually see the question, which is helpful. And then you can see how our students scored. You can get it down right to the student, but you can say in general, this question they did well on. Here's a question they did not do well on, and then the teachers are analyzing that for as much that they can extrapolate from it. So that's where they currently are in that review. They just asked for it this week, as a matter of fact.
So like what percentage of questions will the state give you?
Yeah, I mean, if you go on to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, any parent, any community member can actually go and see the questions that are released. There are not as many as we would like to have released. I would say it's half.
Well, yeah, even less than.
Even less.
There's an actual website that has released items on it, and it'll be like, I think it's 5 out of 40, right?
But like,
One of them was.
But like Keith said, being able to identify which standards the
Yeah,
question
that's
connected
helpful.
to, that's helpful.
So even if you don't get the question,
You get
you know
You
what
get the
standard it,
standard.
okay.
Right. And then you look for patterns and trends within that.
And you interrogate kids to have them remember what happened 6 months ago. No, I'm joking. No, we don't do that.
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to commend Greg for an outstanding presentation on very difficult content,
Yes.
especially in this year of transition. And also, again, echo his thoughts. The building administration has been incredibly supportive throughout the transition and working so closely at each school with our teachers. I think this is a true testament, the results that were shared, that our professional staff has been engaged in meaningful and very purposeful teaching strategies that allow students to perform at high levels of achievement. And to the point made, I really want to say thank you to the school committee for being patient, because it does take 3 to 5 years to really yield the results that we are hopeful we will see when you start to embrace new curriculum initiatives and new instructional practices and supports that have been in place. And I think we're starting to see that, to your point, Paul, and we have had this conversation over the years. And this, to Greg's point again, you know, for us, this is revolutionary, but to our student, it's more aligned with what they're doing in the classroom and how they learn as 21st century students. And the fact that all of the students now have access to those accommodations, or what they used to, you know, be called in MCAS 2.1.0 world, accommodations, to do the kinds of things that they do in the classroom, to edit, to highlight, to make changes, the add drop feature. That's a tremendous move forward for all students in terms of providing equity of tools that will help them perform well, to Roger's point. So therein lies success.
All right.
And so the next is the legislative update.
Success, again, sometimes happens at the legislative level, but never quickly. Again, that 3 to 5 cycle we know exists. Last month we shared a lot of information that was shared with us at the state conference, and right now I think we're all in sort of the holiday spirit mode of let's wait till the beginning of the new year. So I have not seen any specific legislative initiative that's right now moving forward. You know, soon we will be talking about the governor's budget when we return. Our next school committee meeting is, you know, already launching the 2018 budget discussion. But for this point, we're just being watchful over all of those lists of legislative initiatives that could potentially impact our funding and our ability to do the work in the district. Paul, I know you track legislative. It's been pretty quiet in the last month.
Yeah, I got nothing.
I got nothing.
Next.
Old business.
Old business.
Old business.
School calendar.
School calendar. You know, I actually was quite delighted to hear throughout the presentations this evening a lot of focus on the professional development that takes place across the district, not because we have days that are identified in the calendar, but rather because it's delivered at a time when it's most meaningful for our teachers and benefit our students in terms of their ongoing learning throughout the school year. And, you know, from the presentation that Gary and Keith made, talking about the training that's embedded in the experience that our ESPs and teachers are having together as they continue to collaborate and share best practice, to the work that we're going to do with some of that information as we continue to spend some professional time talking about our student assistance team. So this is an ongoing experience that we hope will be realized through our ongoing calendar discussions. And there will be I'm hopeful that there will be a proposal for not only addressing the calendar discussion, but addressing the need to, as we talked about, a test for 21st century that reflects 21st century teaching and learning. That too then I think is part of our calendar discussion around the way we deliver professional development. And secondarily, we know that PD was the #1 other in the category box on the survey from parents. And so I think through some innovative dialogue with lots of folks, we may be able to address more than just the days in the calendar next year. So I'm hopeful that this will be realized in time to present next Wednesday at the combined meeting, where I know all 3 committees will take up this conversation again. And I just want to also say thank you to the NASA, the administrative team, for being also mindful of the need for change, and for all the work and support that our associations have provided in terms of having an open mind and willing to embrace new practices. I see Dave is our audience member again, so thank you. more information to be shared once finalized, hopefully next Wednesday.
Kindergarten transition update?
Clayton, Principal Ryan, I think, is well on his way to sending out those kindergarten letters and getting ready for the class of, what would this be, 2000, I'm afraid to ask. 30. Yes, we don't want to think there. But, you know, we're always very excited about looking at what those enrollments will be. And again, you know, we talked a little about how does the Department of Ed come up with its statistical analysis. I think they hire some of the NESDEC folks to put that together, because we are looking at our NESDEC enrollment, we're looking at our census numbers to try to predict what our kindergarten numbers will look like, but at this point it's too early. We do anticipate having, because it is a budget priority and it was a focus area for us last year, and we made some success and progress around moving to a more full day K model, we will be talking about that within the greater context of the budget discussion in January.
Municipal Technology Committee discussion.
Mr. Desmond and I had the good fortune to attend right before Thanksgiving a meeting with the Board of Selectmen, where the language that was proposed by Mr. Challen at our last meeting and wholeheartedly embraced by the committee was presented, and they too were excited about the proposed language and the way we're going to move forward in terms of selecting the members for the Municipal Technology Committee. I recently, as recently as yesterday, received an email from our town administrator suggesting that it would be a great idea if we took the role on of moving forward with scheduling those interviews. And I believe what a proposal might be to the committee is to consider having Paul, who was nominated as the representative on the MTC committee, from the committee, school committee, and myself.
I think it's really
Appointed.
right?
I was given him time to back out. I was actually, it was the holiday season, so, appointed, and myself and/or designee to sit down with the library, the representative from the library, and the two representatives from the Board of Selectmen who have been appointed to interview the candidates. What?
Who were they, if I may ask?
Brian Schifrin and Brian Valentine. So
Oh, okay.
Brian is
Sure. Yep.
the accountant,
Treasurer.
yeah, financial accountant for the town.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what his official
financial
title
manager,
is.
I think.
And Brian, of course, is newly elected Board of Selectmen. So the hope would be that we have an opportunity to gather together next week, if we can find a time, a couple hours, to review all of the information that's been received by the committees, comments made by every member on the resumes that were presented. And the library actually did not engage in any kind of posting, so they requested a review of our applicants and the Board of Selectmen's applicants, and they would be reviewing that along with both committees. And then hopefully in January, from that group, we would then invite the applicants to come in for an interview, a formal interview.
Now, all these meetings, it's required to be posted meetings, the discussions, are these all public meetings from a discussion standpoint?
I think the
Discussion part of it or not?
I don't believe so. Those are the working groups, and much
Okay.
like we have working groups and
Yeah,
study
because
groups.
there's not any
Right.
quorum issues.
Right.
Right, so I think that's just, you know, going through the resumes, gathering and processing the input that we've received, selecting the applicants and arranging the interview times. It is my hope, given that it's budget season and if we're being asked to spearhead this, that we move quickly and sort of have this wrapped up maybe the second week in January if we're able to schedule everyone.
The interview processes are also just a working group, or is that a posted meeting type?
I would imagine that would be
Could be
posted,
posted,
but, you know, we'll double check. But I would imagine that would be a posted process.
Mhm.
Paul, I would imagine when we gather together, hopefully next week, we'll be formulating some questions as well from the committee.
Makes sense.
to be ready for, just ready to roll when we have the interviews set up.
So then it sounds like the schools and Board of Selectmen folks will be working together, not necessarily the library folks, or is it gonna be
There
some-
will be the one
Can we-
library representative as well. So he will join us.
Is that I'm sorry, has that been determined?
Yes, I believe it's Ryan Donovan.
Oh, okay. Well, nobody from the board.
That's my understanding at this point. So it's a 5-member review committee and then an interview committee.
So what do we need from the other members of the school committee now? Because Paul, you're doing the work with Christine. From us, you need questions?
If you have them, sure, but,
Okay.
I mean, if you just go through the resumes that we got. and,
Yeah.
You know,
We can go through
throw
them
in
and-
any feedback that you want.
And then feedback goes to Christine on any resumes or any questions or anything like that, and then that can, that way we just have it all go through one person.
Okay.
Just sound,
Actually, the Board of Selectmen reposted. They had a technology snafu, so they extended the reposting period. We supported their efforts by also extending ours. It, quite frankly, never came down from the website posting, so that had been out there for that length of time. The time to submit is over, and we did not receive any additional resumes. So I think we're looking in total at somewhere just shy of 16
That's a good
resumes
number.
in
That's not
total.
bad.
But, between the two committees. I do have extra hard copies with me, if anyone would like to take an extra packet. It was sent to all the members. We had one false start, and then we had a successful launch. But I do have packets if anyone wants copies of them as well. I think there's enough for everyone.
okay, we all set on that, are we? Next item is,
Actually, one more thing.
oh,
So
yes.
these are just the school committee?
These are
ones
just
that we
the
got?
school committees.
Can we get access to the other ones, the ones the town got?
Sure. The library had access to them, so I'm sure I can get someone to send us an email with them, and I can send them off PDF. We're gonna try to meet next week, so we probably wanna set a deadline for feedback no later than Monday. I'm not sure what the availability of Brian and Ryan are. It's an interesting, Brian and Ryan.
If you set a deadline.
BB and R, I think that's,
If you set a deadline for feedback on Monday, have you set a deadline to get the rest of the resumes out to folks?
tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, we'll get,
If I think it's a push of a button because they've already sent them PDFs to the library, so.
Yep. Next item is public safety building update.
We have had 2 opportunities, Principal Mucci, myself, to visit the Woodward site with various members of the transportation consultant, the design consultant that we talked about last month in terms of, having them come out and do a far more extensive analysis of the site beyond just the scope of the Woodward Circle and having access to the new public roadway. And then, again, we walked the site with Karen Galligan, the superintendent of DPW, and Mark Purple, the town administrator, a week and a half ago. Where we are now is we're in a holding pattern because we have not received the results of the transportation study or the diagrams and findings from the design study. However, I received an email, and Jerry and I were both part of this, Tuesday night, it was fairly late Tuesday night, requesting that we consider and provide answers to questions which actually Principal Mucci and myself asked of them when we conducted our site visits. And I did respond on our behalf and basically say it is not feasible for us to provide answers this evening because we pose the questions and we don't have the information we need to make thoughtful and thorough responses. And this is something, when we're talking about children's safety, We want to make sure that we have considered all of the input from both the transportation consultant and the designer. Just Monday, I received the final, the actual proposal from the design consultant, outlining the scope of the work that we had requested. And I know they're out and about, they've contacted Steve for numbers of buses and routes and so forth. So we've given all of the information, I think, that they need to conduct their work and provide us with the feedback. So we're hopeful. The town is requesting that we sort of gather and provide some responses to these 10 questions or so by December 31st. And, we can't provide those answers without more information, without the information. So I did let them, I did let them know that that's our circumstance, and we need that information and an opportunity to sort of process this before we can really provide the responses that will move us forward in the direction we need to go. So that's where we are right now, and I'm hopeful that the response to this will, sort of be an expediting of the responses from the transportation consultant, particularly since they're really working under the auspices of the town. The design consultant is as well, but we've, asked them to do some extended analysis of the site for us. So today I met with both Chief Liver and Chief Paulus for a couple hours on a myriad of topics. And with respect to conversations with Chief Paulus, it was kind of insightful to listen to all of the things that he's being asked to consider as part of this project as well. And the intent and the desire of the town is to have the shovels in the ground shortly after the first of the year. So there's a lot of information that needs to be shared before that. But we're on top of it to the extent we're waiting at this point. I think, Steve, we probably collectively, it was about 4 hours, I think we spent looking at the
Not to
site.
mention the first visit,
That's
it's Greg and Matt.
Yeah, walking through the woods
Yep.
and seeing the clubhouse for
Yeah.
the first time. So I think there's still a lot of things that need to be determined on the town side. The good news was we did hear that the tanks that are under the circle part of the Woodward driveway, in all likelihood would need to be dug up regardless of what conversations we were having, because they are definitely tied to the new siting and the new building of the sewer site. So that's good for us.
Mhm.
And I did ask Karen if she could just accidentally plow down some of the trees on the way to the site. She wasn't too encouraging with her response. But we've also, I think, expanded the conversation. There's really, one of the questions that they asked us through this email last night was, what signage are you requesting? And actually, we engaged them in this conversation, because if you're coming down, 85, there's really not a lot of notification that there is a school there. And so with increased traffic flow, we had asked the conversation about whether or not we could at least put some additional flashing lights on 85. And it was an interesting conversation because no one quite knew whether there was or wasn't. So that conversation about the signage.
Coming down from the south?
In both directions,
Okay.
really, So with the notion that the Main Street project is going to be under construction at the same time, it's important that we consider these pieces. The other part of the conversation, that without having the town there and having those conversations as we did, the consideration of the extension of the sidewalk down from Main Street is now a much more important discussion. The original plan was to maybe extend the sidewalk down in front of Woodward, and as we began to have conversations about traffic flow and entry points and exit points and alignment with the new roadways, there'll be 2 entry points as now proposed, made the conversation a little bit more relevant in a different way, and whether or not we could enhance the sidewalk right into the Woodward School, and maybe not only on the side but in the front. So it's gone in several different directions, but all good in that everybody's really being very thoughtful about options.
Oh, great, Christine, thank you for all the work you've done on that, so.
And
Steve.
Principal Mucci.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at how well and how quickly Steve is an expert on Woodward School. And that's meant with great appreciation and sincerity. When we had conversations, Steve was just clearly, he's out there and really observing what's happening on a daily basis. So that was, I'd say thank you to Principal Mucci, because that was incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Subject matter expert par excellence.
He is.
And I think that
Rapid rise.
to kind of sum that up too, there's some information that's being asked from us, okay?
Mhm.
That we really need to have more information before we can get back to them with it. So we'll just leave that with Christine and with Steve, and when you have the information, and I'm sure you're trying to get it as quick as you can, we'll be able to provide that information.
And so, as always, we'll provide the updates. There might be a doodle poll coming your way if the information becomes available. I know that the committee is really invested in this project, and certainly as the information comes to us, it might be appropriate to offer an opportunity to come together and just review what the design team said and what the transportation consultant said as well, beyond our work and our conversations, just to share this information.
Yep.
Because it is moving quickly. So as we receive that, I'll definitely reach out and make that information known.
Very good. Next item is enrollments, enrollments, distribution, discussion, and the NESDEC enrollments.
So in your packets, not only do we have the monthly distribution of our current enrollments, but we do have the NESDEC projections. We are tracking from, so I'm more interested in looking at what they said last year, not what they said this year, because they just take our new numbers and plug them in, and voila, they're exactly on target. It's a miraculous event. So I pulled up last year's NESDECs this time last year, and so we're about 20 students off of their projection. They projected 1229 and or 1229, and so there's about a 20 student variance. The one significant change in the report that I noticed is, as I looked at last year's report, their projections start at PK1 for grade combinations, and in the new projection, they're starting with K4. So the way in which they're presenting the information is a little different, probably very similar to MCAS 2.0, and it's just it's a different way of adding up the numbers. I think it's safe to say that we're not tracking exactly on, but we're not so far afield as we've done in the past. The kindergarten, the pre-K number definitely swings the data, because our pre-K number when we start, the preschool number when we start with a very low projection of 49 students. And that's what they based the numbers on last year in 2016. And now we see that we've had a definite increase in those enrollment numbers at the kindergarten, at the preschool level. And in fact, I think, Clayton, we're meeting Friday to review what that means in terms of budget and staffing and support services that might be needed. As we know, it's funded in part through tuition fees, but it's also funded to some extent by grants and operational budget. So we've got three pieces that are going into that preschool funding model, and the meeting will be very informative and will be very helpful for us to figure out where all those moving three pieces will go in order to be able to support the numbers that we see moving through. And then, of course, those numbers definitely impact our K. They're already in our system, combined with those new kindergarten enrollment numbers that we're anticipating. So right now, it's a little early to be able to be very specific about any numbers. In terms of the K-8 as it stands this year, I think our numbers are pretty consistent. So NESDEC was projecting 1249, and we're at about 1200. So there's again some, 20 to 40 swing. Some of that happens at the K level and the way they configure the grade spans when you look at this data. So you have to really disaggregate how they're calculating it. But we'll use this, and we'll be referring to this as well as our enrollment projections very soon, at the next meeting, actually.
Okay, next item is monthly general fund expenditure report, and we'll need a motion on that.
Vote to approve until audited. Matt, is there anything you'd like to add? Nothing to add at this point. I know having lots of meetings and watching very closely, not only in terms of what our budget will look like in 19, the numbers are starting to come together. I thank the administrative team for doing what they always do well, which is being mindful of what their needs are and what the budget is, and but also making sure that we're on target in FY18.
So I need a motion to approve until audited the Southborough Public School District FY 2018 budget monthly general fund expenditure report as of November 30th, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Motion passes.
Budget priorities are in your packet. We did vote these and approve them last month. We will be revisiting them throughout the budget process. And also the budget calendar. We continue to add to this, and just, about a half an hour before the meeting, I received a packet from the town administrator. You have a copy of it. It's the colorful green with Snoopy on it, who I think is, his house is all dressed up in lights, so it's a cheery thought. And they have a Board of Selectmen meeting scheduled for December 19th. We are cordially invited to attend. I will be attending. They'll be reviewing the budget landscape and the impacts of certain indicators on the budget, the proposed budget for FY19. And it's a lot of information here, but I think it will be quite informative and certainly help in our budget conversations as well.
Not like last year.
No. Yeah, I'm just flipping the pages, and there's a educational department's total educational requests up 3.13%. Unless this is historical data, there's certainly no data that has come through from our office. So interesting to see how this is calculated. And again, haven't really had a chance to chat with Mark Purple, but these are their estimates, not ours. We haven't submitted anything to the town.
Fake news?
Could be fake numbers, I don't know, fake news, fake numbers. I think, I would like to just call them really important preliminary data.
Okay, so budget discussion and capital plan.
At this point, the capital plan was approved. We'll be discussing that as well. We do not have cost factors, and that's another thing that I did share with Jason Malinowski in my email, that for every decision and every option we select, on every unknown option, there is a cost related to that. So for us to know what those costs are incredibly important to us, particularly since we are projecting, at this point, X amount of dollars. I think it's $100,000 set aside from building facilities rental to address any of the modifications that we might want to make at Woodward. So, knowing what it is that we're going to be doing and how much that costs for us is very important. Because if it's less than what we're projected, we can reshift those resources elsewhere in the budget process. At this point, we are working on a level service budget and taking into consideration the summary of requested expenditures, budget items that exceed the level service discussion. So a number of the principals have submitted particular resources they needed for next year, to be considered in the budget process, and we're folding that into the discussion. More to follow.
Next is educational policy, the annual Stone environmental trip.
I'm requesting that the school committee approve both the Stone environmental and the Washington DC trips. You have descriptions on both in the packets. I think one of the exciting aspects of this plan presented was the opportunities for students to engage in connectivity with one another, to have a meaningful experience that's tied to the curriculum. And Keith, each year you have so many great stories and moments to share with us, and I think you have some snapshot as well.
We're putting that to a few pictures this year.
So if you were not going to approve for any reason,
Yeah.
this will change your mind
I hope so.
completely.
I hope so. Yes, in accordance with school committee policy on student travel, I'm, like Superintendent John said, requesting your approval of next year's fall of 2018 trips. And before we get to that, Gary's going to do a short review of the Stone experience, and then I'll follow up with DC. And literally the planning for these trips does begin, hopefully, as soon as your approval occurs. So we're forecasting that anyways. Gary, all yours.
So I have the great pleasure of going to Stone every year, and it is not only a rite of passage and tradition for our sixth grade students, it's just part of the Trottier experience as a whole. The curriculum connections in the science classes have been tremendous, so there's tremendous academic gains, but more importantly the social gains, which our students experience, really makes the trip so worthwhile. You know, having kids go and leave and go to East Madison, New Hampshire for 3 days is really a growing experience for many. Some kids have never had a sleepover. We challenge them socially. We take them out of their comfort zones. And the campus itself is just tremendous, and it's a great experience. They're outside from 8 o'clock in the morning to about 9 o'clock at night every day. So in the year 2017, an additional component of the trip is that they're required to unplug for 3 days. Mm-hmm. And so that's been a tremendous benefit for us. They have to, work with their fellow classmates, in the dining halls, in the dorms. We make sure that they expand their friendship groups during that time. And in addition, it gives them great connections with their teachers. To see their teachers playing basketball out on a night hike is just a great benefit, and that's carried over when upon their return in the classroom. This year probably was the greatest weather that we've had. I think there was maybe one overcast morning, but whether it's snowing or raining, the kids love the experience as a whole. That is Mr. St. Pierre, teacher, coach, chaperone, and now snake charmer. So, those are moments that that we just have a blast the whole time up there. So, I would really love to see this trip continue in every way, shape, or form. Again, the feedback is always positive, and it really is a great way to start the year in the sixth grade experience for our students.
And likewise, to end their years at Trottier, we have the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. Those are our mode of transportation to navigate our nation's capital, and we're certainly very lucky. If there's any way to go through Washington, D.C., it is by motor coach, that's for sure, because you think that something's very close, but in fact it's 2 miles away. So having the ability to do that, we get to so much in such a short amount of time when we are traveling. And like we've done for the last 7 years, and I can't believe I'm even saying 7 years, we're traveling over Veterans Day weekend, which has added a dimension to this trip that honestly can't be replicated. Here we have one of our 8th graders who found a relative on the Vietnam War Memorial Wall. We did experience this memorial in the evening as they were reading the names of all the victims of the Vietnam War Memorial that are represented on the walls. And we had a chaperone kind of go ahead of the group with this student, locate the name of the relative, and he's obviously using his cell phone to take a picture and send it to his loved ones. So pretty powerful image there. The other thing we're able to do as part of Veterans Day and to certainly connect with our veterans is we visit Arlington National Cemetery. This is one of our 8th grade students that has a family connection to this particular soldier that lost his life in Afghanistan in 2007. And we, in fact, made a little thing from Southborough to share it with the family at the gravesite over Veterans Day weekend. I wish we got that as part of the shot because my administrative assistant put together this gorgeous little thing that said, "Southborough's thinking of you." And we were able to at least put it on the gravesite for a while. And the reason why I included this particular image is that this student could tell you chapter and verse about this family friend that passed away by just causes in the Afghanistan conflict. So certainly real-time connections are happening. And we are very fortunate also at Arlington to encounter veterans. So that's not a chaperone in the middle there, but that is in fact a Vietnam vet. And when he was looking at the Challenger Memorial that is right behind us, kind of our students are facing in that direction, our students spontaneously went up to him and a group of other veterans and said thank you by shaking their hands. And this is a common thing that does happen without prompt that our students engage in. When they see and identify a veteran, they will reach a hand out and say thank you. And this particular gentleman was so taken by that, he wanted a group photo. And certainly that's a small group of us because we were 140 large. This is about 25 students or so that did gather around him, and he wanted the photo to remember that day and remember that encounter. And he was very taken back by the maturity of our students and their ability to even say thank you in a polite way. So very, very, very proud of our guys here. And certainly another highlight of the trip, that is Dennis McDonough. That is President Obama's last chief of staff before he ended his term in the Oval Office. And looking like a regular Joe in the middle of the mall, a beautiful setting in between the Washington Monument and the Capitol. We sat our kids down, and at first they really didn't have any clue who this guy was. But shortly after, and after our chaperones gave the kids a little perspective on just how close he was to the president in the Oval Office, you start this percolating, kids kind of looking around going, who's this guy again? And he, in fact, 2 days prior to that, had lunch with President Obama and was sharing football stories and going back and forth. So, having our government become real with these different experiences is something that, we certainly can't replicate in the classroom. And this is a great, great shot. And the way that Dennis is actually the cousin of one of our 8th graders. And that's why we're able to have him join us. And there's been 3 of these kids that have come through Trottier, all have experienced a trip, and Dennis has met with us all 3 times. So from the beginning of the administration to after the administration, he has taken the time to meet with us, and he'll answer just about every question we had. And Dennis claims the fame is to be, he was in the Situation Room when Osama bin Laden was taken down by SEAL Team 6, and he was able to share his thoughts during those moments. And our kids are like, that was another time like, wait a minute, where were you? And I saw kids later on with their smartphones Googling Dennis, and then the image that was on Time magazine popped up, and they're like, oh my God, okay, now I get it. And then he did take a ton of our questions from, I think the one that was most powerful to me is he was actually the last person of the Obama administration to step foot out of the Oval Office, right as President Trump took the oath. So it was pretty, remarkable to think that he was in fact the person, and that was something that stuck with the kids. So from these almost unbelievable moments that you can never replicate to those things that hopefully we'll see time and time again as being with our veterans, our kids had a great trip. The weather wasn't as good as it was at Stone. It was chilly. Right there, the kids were holding on for us for 15 minutes, but November travel can be a little bit up and down. But we did have the students outside, like Gary said, even from Stone, from 8 a.m. right until 9 p.m. And they were tired, and that's the point. So we would, that was just kind of a snapshot of the 2 trips, and we just wrapped this up a few short weeks ago, and we'd love to start planning 2018. So we'd love to have your approval.
Well, since I have an 8th grader next year, I would be happy to move that we approve the 2018 Stone Environmental Center trip for the 6th graders and the Washington DC trip for the 8th graders.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion?
The two of them.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Motion
Thank you.
passes. Thank you, guys. That's a
Yeah.
great trip. So,
Great.
both of those trips are great trips. Next item on the agenda is the second reading and a vote to approve or recommend edits to the curriculum policy. Just get out. It's I-140.
This is the only policy before you for consideration for a vote this evening, and I added recommend edits if there are any. So we just need a motion.
And this, on this policy, now, we asked Christine and Greg, we asked you guys to take care of this and make sure that you were totally okay with this.
Mhm.
So we need a motion to approve.
I'll move that we approve curriculum policy I-140.
And discussion?
Second.
Do I have a
I'll
second?
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor? Motion passes.
The next policy, thank you, is a vote to rescind a lot of the language with respect to health services and so forth can be contained in other policies or just good practices in the classroom, so they don't really require policy any longer. This has been sort of an ongoing conversation, and our health and wellness district-wide subcommittee for policy does an excellent job of making sure that the policies that we need are in place and the practices that we are required for good health and safety are in the classrooms and in our schools. So we just need a vote to rescind at this point.
So I will move that we rescind policy for health services in regard to the classroom, J210.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Rescinded. And
Last policy is a
Yep.
distribution.
so distribution of personnel report.
In your packets for consideration, and it's nice to see as the year goes on, there are fewer and fewer names. Becky's always happy to see that as well. Again, a lot of great work in the area of human resources.
And communications, none at this time. And minutes. And this is the minutes of the open meeting of November 6th. And we need a motion to approve.
I'll move that we approve the Southborough School Committee open meeting minutes of November 6, 2017.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion passes. And bills and payrolls, agendas, items for next month?
Matt's hiding them, but we do
Yes,
have them,
you
there's a
do have
stack.
them.
He's keeping you in suspense, we do have bills and payrolls to be signed. And just a few agenda items that we discussed this evening, definitely an update on the K-12 World Language Study Group. Kathleen's doing great work making sure that takes form, and so I'm sure there'll be an update on that. The FY19 budget discussion, two items that were, I think, discussed moving forward throughout the year, the updates on the MTC and the public safety building, and also the kindergarten transition update will be part of our budget discussion, but we've decided that we wanted that to be a separate item, just so that it's always on the agenda.
Yeah.
Just a few things to look forward to.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll
It's
be a
going to
lot
be
more
very
to be
busy in
added.
January.
It will be a very busy January.
And the last item is audience sharing. So it's, at this point, it's just time to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.